Hey fellow babies, welcome back to Pachter Factor on SIFTD.net. Hope you're watching this real time as a Patreon patron, and if so, thank you for your patronage. It is inexpensive, and if you can afford anything, we appreciate your contributing. If you are watching on YouTube, you're getting it a week late, and at a minimum, would you please consider linking your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account? That becomes Twitch Prime. And then just subscribing to the show. Amazon will pay us a couple bucks a month, so that keeps the cameras rolling, and that allows Shane to, as I said, eat macaroni out of the box. Our first question comes from Twitter, from @Guido Bernertz. Do you agree that there may be a recession on the way? If it happens, would Microsoft or Sony consider pushing back the release dates of their new platforms? Look, a recession is a near certainty, but I can't tell you when. And just for you guys who don't study economics, when you add up all of the, they call it the productivity of the country. So it's the sum of all the things that we make, all the goods, so all the cars and laptops and bacon that we produce, and all the services we render, so my giving advice to investors and I get paid for it as services. When you add up all the goods and services produced by the country, that's what we call gross domestic product. And so when GDP grows, then the economy is growing. That just means more stuff. Economy should grow because of population growth. So just if the population goes up 1%, just as a simple matter, the economy should grow 1%. If you are growing faster than your population growth, that means that the economy is more productive. And that just means it's producing more per person than it did the year before. If the economy was flat, if the economy was up 1% and population was flat, everybody's producing 1% more than they were before. So a good economy in the West is about 2% to 3%. President Trump has been talking 4%. I think we've had 1 or 2 quarters of that in the last 10 years, but not very often do we grow 4%, and not very often do we grow less than 2%. So, the Federal Reserve tries to manage growth at that 2 to 3% level. A recession just means that the economy contracts, that it actually gets smaller. So GDP declines, it turns negative. Now, what causes that to happen? And the answer is, nothing goes up in a straight line. I mean, they tend to do that. The line dips a little bit occasionally. So we have had, I want to say, 10 consecutive years of GDP growth. I don't think we've had a down quarter in 10 years. This is the longest, what they call expansion, in the history of the United States. The longest. So will we have a recession? Yeah, 100%. We're going to have one eventually. What triggers a recession? Well, they tend to be driven by unemployment. So if companies stop hiring and people lose their jobs, then those people aren't generating any GDP. They're not creating goods, they're not providing services, and the economy contracts. We have full employment, so we're probably not about to have unemployment. So what else causes GDP to decline? And the answer is prices go up too high and people buy less stuff. And what makes prices go up? Among other things, obviously the cost of inputs does, but what makes product prices go up? Tariffs. So we have a guy in the White House who thinks trade wars are easy to win and they're good for the economy. He's wrong. They're horrific for the economy. So he started a trade war with China, and that's going to raise the price of anything that comes from China. And some products can be shifted out of China pretty quickly, but most products can't. So if you're going to buy plastic, the plastic housing for my Logitech mouse, I'm sure that thing was made in China. They're just more efficient. They have lower environmental regulations, lower cost of production of everything, and the prices of that stuff are going up. And when prices go up, people buy less of it, and GDP suffers. So one of the reasons we've had this amazing expansion in the United States is we've allowed production to move to China of a lot of stuff that just doesn't make sense to make here. And places like Walmart literally get something like 75% of their non-food products from China. I mean, think about patio furniture. Think about molded plastic chairs. Of course they come from China. And that's why everything's so cheap, because we can get stuff cheap. So if we if we keep this trade war going with China, yes, we're going to have a recession. How long will it be? What will happen? Will people lose jobs? My guess is 1 or 2 quarters and maybe a decline of 0.5%. So realistically, it's not going to make a big difference in your life and you're not going to care. The stock market will go down, so people who live off of their investments are going to be pissed. Probably, if we have a recession, we'll probably get a new president because the voters are not going to like it, and it could cause job loss. But I really think we're going to go from +2 to -0.5, so about a 2.5% shift in the economy. That's not enough to cause Sony and Microsoft not to produce consoles. And remember, we're talking about a recession in the US because we have tariffs on China. We're not talking about a global recession. So Sony and Microsoft are going to sell consoles elsewhere as well. So again, I mean, Europe's going to have its own problems because of Brexit. Brexit is going to cause prices to go up in the UK. It's going to probably put the UK into a recession. But truth is, things that cause prices to go up and recessions to happen aren't good. And things that keep the economy expanding are good. Would you rather have lots of stuff from China and be able to afford lots of stuff, or have everything made in the US and have no job? That's essentially the two extremes. And you know, we've been doing fine. We have full employment, so it's not exactly like China's taken all our jobs. Everybody who wants a job in the US has one. So I truly don't understand why we're imposing tariffs on China, and I think that neither does anybody who works in Washington, D.C., but they just allow it to happen. So yes, a recession's on the way. No, Microsoft and Sony won't consider pushing back the release dates of their platforms. Our next question from YouTube, from Brandon. Hey, Brandon. When can we expect a true successor to the Switch? Will Nintendo continue to launch new platforms in the middle of the traditional hardware cycle? I think that the Switch as a console is going to go away. Not soon. You know, I think that the Switch will be produced for another 5 or 7 years. But I think the Switch Lite is the new Switch. And I think the successor to Switch will be a handheld only. I think the experiment with the console was dumb. Could you make a handheld that will play on your television? Of course you can. I mean, Apple TV works that way, right? You can stream on any device and make it work that way. So I think the innovation will be that Nintendo will design a Switch that will have an interface and let it play on your TV, but you'll still hold the device in your hand and you'll still play with those controls. Or just the screen will get shifted up to the TV. Who cares? Like, that's easy to do. I don't think you're going to have a docking station and a console version on the next generation Switch. So the answer is yes, there'll be a successor. No, it's not coming soon. Let's see if the Switch Lite is a massive success, which I think it will be. And honestly, if Nintendo can make that for $200 instead of $300, they win. I mean, that's how you keep winning, is more consumers will buy a Switch at $200 than at $300. So, you know, keep producing great stuff, and I think that that's what you're going to see. Our next question from SIFTD, from Zet Saber. Would it be better for Sony to release 2 PlayStation 5 SKUs at different price points to allow consumers to buy what they can afford, or stick to one SKU to improve production output? You know, the reason is not production output. The reason for not releasing 2 SKUs is that one will be better than the other, and you'll end up making 2 failures instead of 1 successful console. I'll give you an anecdote, true story. My old girlfriend, I've been married 24 years, but before my wife, my old girlfriend's dad told me about how he had a restaurant and he went out of business. And he said, and I'm just going to use like today prices because I don't remember the numbers, but he said that he was really successful and his best seller was a filet mignon, and it was 12 ounces, and he would sell this 12-ounce bone-in filet and say for $45. And he just couldn't keep them in stock, and everybody was just ordering, and he was always full, and everybody's really happy. And he said one day, one of his regular customers, the wife said, 12 ounces is too much, and why don't you make a small one? So he made a petite filet for $25 for 6 ounces. And he said the next thing he knew, everybody was ordering the petite filet, and he went from making, $35 profit on a steak to making $20 profit on a steak, and he went out of business. And he said, I cannibalized my own business. Now, I think that's why you don't do 2 SKUs, because if you can sell all the consoles you can manufacture at $400 or $500, why offer one for $300? You do that late in the cycle, and what you do is you segment the consumer into the one who can afford, the early adopter who has plenty of money and will spend it, and the late adopter who has to save up and doesn't have a lot of money gets it later. And that's just the breaks. And I think your question is like, why don't movies get released in the theater and for rental on DVD the same day? Because no one would go to the theater because the price is half as much. So I think no, I don't think Sony's going to do that. I think it'll be 1 SKU. All right, our last question this week from SIFTD, from Lil Fish. How do you feel about Google Stadia's business model? Do you think it's the right approach, or would you have handled launch differently? What benchmarks do they have to hit to become the leader in game streaming? Are you planning on supporting Google early on with this Founders Edition? Let me answer the last question first. No, I'm not buying one. I think that there is a model for streaming and Google doesn't have it. How's that? There's a range of models for streaming that are going to work, and Google hasn't been very good about telling people what they're going to do in the future. We just know this initial model. But the range is that you can charge people a subscription for the service and give them no games, and that's what the Stadia business model launching in November is. And then presumably if they want games, they have to pay for the games. Then the other extreme with that same model is you charge nothing for the service and you can only buy games on it. So think about it like Steam, right? They don't charge you for Steam service, but they charge you for the game. And that's how you make your money. The other model is you charge a subscription and give them a lot of games so the consumer gets a value for his money. And then the final model, and I'm sure, I'm giving you these 4, but you guys probably can come up with infinite numbers of models, but permutations of this, is pay as you go. So charge somebody, and this is the Chinese internet cafe model, where in the US it would be, say, $1 an hour and play all the games you want. And I think the best model is the pay as you go model. I think the $1 an hour model is the best. I think the second best model is free service and buy the game. I think the third best model is subscription. And so they're starting with subscription, and I don't think that's the best business model. And I honestly don't even have a 4K TV, so I could care less about Founders Edition 4K, because I don't play games in 4K now, and I don't care. The other problem Google has is they don't have any content right now. I mean, I think they've announced one game. I can buy Game Pass, and I get a lot of games. I mean, 100 games or 200 games or whatever. I'm sure all of you have forgotten about PlayStation Now, but there are hundreds of games on that. And I don't think it's cheap. It's like $100 a year or something, $15 a month.
$8 or $10 a month.
Yeah, it's $100 a year for sure. Yeah. But that's not particularly successful yet. Those are subscriptions, right? EA's got EA Origin Access, and it's not. I mean, I think when you add all these up, maybe there's 2-3 million people subscribing. So Google is going after that market. I don't think that's smart. I think if somebody came up with a Chinese internet model, $1 per hour. Now, if you make, and I don't know about this year's Call of Duty, but let's say the single player campaign in Call of Duty is like 20 hours. Then Activision would be like, no, you can't buy it for $1 an hour because we'll get screwed. Agreed. So put it on for $1 an hour a year from now, right? When the next Call of Duty comes out, put the old one on, because you're only selling it for $20. Who cares? And if somebody plays it for 1 hour and doesn't like it, who cares? You just made $1. So I actually think that model will work. I think you can get every game ever made a year after launch. And I think that the publishers will go, this is great. Now let's think, what if you had Grand Theft Auto 5, right? Which for sure is 20 bucks. And you put it on your Google Stadia for $1 an hour. That game is a 200-hour game. So the player is going to be like, man, if I was Google, I would say to Take-Two, $1 an hour, but hey, Take-Two, when the guy gets up to 20 hours, we're going to say, hey, congratulations, you own the game. We're not going to screw him and let him spend 200 bucks. And if I'm Take-Two, I'd be like, yeah, that's fair, because it is fair, right? Then everybody gets paid. And maybe you make him wait till he paid 30 bucks or 40 bucks, but you don't let him, start playing GTA Online and spend 500 hours and he's $500 in and he hasn't bought anything in the game. That wouldn't be fair. But think of how good that model is. And imagine if you're a gamer, and I talk to Microsoft about this all the time. The Game Pass, they tell us that people try some ridiculous thing like 38% more games. Like then they look at their activity before they join Game Pass and their activity after, and people are like, oh shit, I get to try Assassin's Creed 2? Like, sure, I'll play that. So, I think that, and that's really good to get people to buy the next generation Assassin's Creed. Sony told me the same thing. They said the people who played Red Dead 1 on their subscription were 20 something, I don't know, a lot of percent more likely to buy Red Dead 2, and then they could tell, and they hadn't bought Red Dead 1. So really interesting. So I think you can get so many games for $1 an hour. That's the right model. I don't think Google has the right model, and I'm curious to see if Microsoft or Sony or Amazon modify what their plans are. If I had to bet, Amazon will come out at $1 an hour. They'll do it. And so my bias is the two models that are best are $1 an hour, and I made up $1, but some amount per hour, and you buy the game and play it unlimited, and we don't care. Because if you are Amazon and you sell a $60 game, you get 18 bucks for that. What the hell do you care if the guy plays it 500 hours? I mean, you got your $18, let him enjoy himself. So I truly don't think Google's got the right model. No, I'm not going to support Google by buying a Founders Edition. I hope that you enjoyed this week's Pachter Factor. If you're a Patreon patron, thank you so much. If you are watching on YouTube, please consider linking your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account. If you are doing neither of those, please follow me on Twitter at Michael Pachter. Follow Shane at Dinfire. Follow SIFTD at SIFTD Games. We'll see you next week.